So, which dinosaur would actually win the ultimate death match? Dinosaurs, a topic I will absolutely never get tired of overthinking. And today my brain decided to ask a very simple, very stupid question. If you dropped a T, Rex, a pack of raptors, and a giant sea monster into the same arena, who actually walks out alive? You're in a 12-year-old probably just screamed T-Rex, obviously, and started humming the Jurassic Park theme. Or if you're more of a dino normie, maybe you're picturing those human-sized movie raptors doing parkour and tag-teaming everything to death. But in reality, the answer is not only not obvious, it might not even be any of those animals. Because here are the facts. The deadliest killer of the dinosaur age might be a species you've never heard of, something that wouldn't get cast in a movie because it looks like a chunky murder heron or a slow barrel-chested ambush predator that mostly stood around waiting for things to make a mistake. And that gets us to the real problem. What does deadliest even mean? Are we talking about bite force, like T, Rex casually crunching bone with over 30,000 newtons of pressure? Or the most efficient killer, the animal that turned calories into corpses with the least effort? Is it total body count over a lifetime, the one that racked up the most kills in its ecosystem? Or do we mean the creature that would kill you the fastest if you time traveled into the Mesozoic without a safety plan and about 3 backup pairs of pants? So what exactly gives? We talk about deadliest dinosaur like it's a high score, but in reality, it's a messy mix of weapons, behavior, and environment. A raptor pack with sickle claws and good coordination is terrifying in one context. A giant bone-crushing tyrannosaur is king in another. And then you have semi-aquatic weirdos like Spinosaurus dipping in and out of the water, playing by a completely different rulebook. Meanwhile, Hollywood has kind of ruined our instincts here. Jurassic Park raptors, way too big. Real Velociraptor was closer to an angry turkey with knives for feet, and many of the top predators were probably feathered. No offense, but the scariest killers of their time might have looked more like oversized murder chickens than sleek lizard dragons. Some of them weren't even fast sprinters. They were heavy, slow ambush hunters that relied on patience and positioning instead of dramatic chase scenes. And then there's the really awkward part. Some of the worst things you could meet in the Mesozoic weren't dinosaurs at all. Mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, giant marine reptiles cruising the water like living torpedoes. If those aren't technically dinosaurs, do they count in our mental list of deadliest dinos? Or have we been using the wrong category this whole time? And to me, that's very strange. With that out of the way, we're going to build a structured, science-based breakdown of the deadliest killers of the dinosaur age. By the end, you might realize your favorite murder lizard wasn't even at the top of the food chain in its own neighborhood, let alone in some ultimate cross-era deathmatch. So before we start throwing T-Rex into a cage match with every other murder lizard that ever lived, we need to ask a very un-YouTube question. What does deadliest actually mean? Because in reality, paleontologists don't get a fossil with a handy stat sheet. There's no KD ratio, 4.7 herbivores per week, carved into the bone. All we have are the physical traits, the rocks those bones are buried in, and some clever physics. So when we talk about lethality, we're inferring it from anatomy, biomechanics, and from how modern predators work. Here are the facts. One dimension is raw killing power. That's your bite force, claw size, neck strength, all the obvious weapons. T, Rex crunching down with something like 30,000 newtons. That's ridiculous. But another dimension is efficiency. How often did a hunt probably succeed? And how much energy did it cost? A giant that wins 1 out of 10 hunts might actually be worse at killing than a smaller predator that almost never misses. Then there's ecological impact. What could this animal realistically take down, and how big? Was it tuned to shred baby hadrosaurs, or could it regularly kill other giant predators? And finally, versatility. Could it hunt solo and in packs, on land and in water, in daylight and at night? A species that can only do one thing in one habitat might be spectacular, but not necessarily the deadliest across the whole dinosaur age. Notice what's missing from that list. Just being huge. Size helps, but it's not a golden ticket. A 7-0. Tonsauropod could absolutely delete you from existence with one badly placed footstep, but it wasn't an animal whose main job was hunting. For this video, we're focusing on specialized predators, species whose evolutionary business model was turning other animals into calories as efficiently as possible. No offense to the angry plant eaters. To get at all this, scientists use a whole toolbox. We estimate bite force by treating skulls like mechanical systems and stress testing them in simulations. We reconstruct muscle attachments on bones to figure out how strong the legs and neck were and how fast the animal could move. Trackways frozen in rock tell us about speed, gait, even group behavior. And isotopic analysis, the tiny chemical signatures locked in teeth and bone, lets us tell if something was eating land animals, fish, or bouncing between marine and terrestrial food webs. With that out of the way, here's how we're going to tackle the problem. First, we'll look at the classic movie monsters, the big theropods like T, Rex, Giganotosaurus, and their bone-crunching, flesh-slicing cousins. Then we'll zoom in on the specialized weirdos, raptors, sickle claws, ambush hunters that might have relied more on brains and teamwork than sheer bulk. After that, we'll head toward the water, checking out semi-aquatic dinosaurs like Spinosaurus and the truly marine reptiles that share their ecosystems. And at the end, we'll try to crown a few different champions: deadliest by bite, deadliest by efficiency, deadliest in the water, and so on. Because the real question isn't who wins in a stadium fight, it's who was evolution's most terrifyingly optimized killing machine over deep time. And spoiler, the top contender might look way more boring than the Hollywood monsters you're used to. So with the rules of the game set, let's start with the dinos everybody thinks are already the answer. So with the rules of the game set, it's time to talk about the dinosaur that every dino normie has already crowned the champion, Tyrannosaurus Rex. On paper, Rex looks like it was built in a lab by a 10-year-old with a sugar high. You're talking over 12 meters long, 8 to 9 tons of muscle, an attitude, and a skull the size of a bathtub stuffed with banana-sized teeth. Each bite, an estimated 30,000 to 35,000 newtons of force. In reality, that's probably the strongest bite of any land animal in Earth's history. Lions, crocodiles, you, me, we're not even in the same sport. But it's not just big bite go chomp. The teeth themselves are weird. They're not sleek steak knives like you see in some other giant theropods. They're thick, oval in cross-section, and heavily reinforced. More like railroad spikes than blades. Here are the facts. Those are bone-crushing tools. We know because we've literally found hadrosaur and cerasopesian bones with T-Rex tooth marks gouged deep into them, and in some cases, those bones show healing, which means the victim survived the initial attack long enough for the bone to start repairing. So T-Rex wasn't just nibbling leftovers, it was actively attacking big, dangerous prey and sometimes missing the kill shot. At the same time, we also see bite marks on carcasses in positions that scream scavenging. So was it a predator or a scavenger? So what exactly gives? Most paleontologists today see it as a hypercarnivorous predator that also scavenged whenever it could, kind of like if a lion and a hyena had a very bitey baby. And ecologically, that actually makes it more deadly, not less, because it's extracting energy from the system any way it can. Its head wasn't the only weapon. Rex had enlarged olfactory bulbs, meaning an excellent sense of smell, and forward-facing eyes for solid depth perception. The body plan is this chunky powerlifter setup, huge thighs, robust tail, not built for 4-0, mile per hour sprints, no offense Jurassic Park, more like powerful bursts and short chases or ambushes in broken terrain. And to me, that's very strange if you're expecting a sprinting movie monster, but if it's an animal that only needs a few steps to catch something once it's close enough. Compared to other giant theropods, T-Rex is the heavyweight boxer. One devastating punch, break the jaw, end the fight. Some of its cousins we'll meet later are more like fencers, built for wide, slashing bites that carve soft tissue instead of pulverizing bone. Which style is actually deadlier? Is shattering your prey's skeleton with one bite the ultimate move? Or is bleeding something out just as efficient over time? With that out of the way, here's the uncomfortable question. Even if T-Rex was the undisputed land champion of its ecosystem, was it really evolution's final boss, or did other giants evolve killing styles so specialized that, in certain arenas, even the bone crusher starts to look a little overrated? So what exactly gives if T-Rex isn't the only giant murder chicken on the block? In reality, if you zoom out from North America, you start running into some competition. Enter the slasher giants, Giganotosaurus in what's now Argentina, Carcharodontosaurus in North Africa, and Maposaurus tagging along in the same general neighborhood as Giga. These weren't budget T-Rexes. These were T-Rex-sized, maybe even a bit longer in some estimates, apex predators ruling their own continents at the same time T-Rex's ancestors were still figuring out how to be scary. And here are the facts. They were built very differently. T-Rex has that deep brick of a skull with teeth like chunky railroad spikes. Giganotosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus, their skulls are longer, narrower, almost crocodile-ish in profile, lined with blade-like serrated teeth. Think of T-Rex as a set of industrial bolt cutters, and these guys as a row of giant steak knives. You don't buy a steak knife to crush the plate, you buy it to turn the steak into confetti. That design hints at a very different killing style. Instead of one colossal crunch meant to shatter bone, these slasher giants probably focused on long, sweeping bites that carved open muscle and skin. Picture a multi-ton predator jogging alongside a sauropod's flank, raking those teeth through flesh, then backing off while the prey bleeds, goes into shock, and slowly runs out of options. And when your neighborhood herbivores are titanosaurs the size of small apartment blocks and giant ornithopods built like buses, that's not overkill, that's just efficient. In those ecosystems, going full bone crusher might actually be less useful than having reach, speed, and weapon length. And to me, that's very strange because it means that in some environments, a T-Rex clone might actually be the wrong tool for the job. Maposaurus takes it one step further. We found bone beds with multiple individuals together, which some paleontologists interpret as loose groups or packs. Not wolf-level tactics, but at least we all showed up to the same buffet energy. A cluster of big theropods circling a weakened sauropod, taking turns slashing and backing off, could inflict catastrophic damage in a short amount of time without any single predator needing a record-breaking bite force number. So, were these guys weaker biters than T-Rex? Probably. Does that make them less deadly? Not necessarily. Deadly can mean highest bite force ever measured, but it can also mean I can open you from shoulder to hip before you even realize I'm there. Different traits, same end result. With that out of the way, we've talked about giant solo monsters and loose murder mobs. But what if the truly terrifying killers weren't the biggest at all? Next, let's shrink things down and look at smaller, smarter, pack-hunting dinosaurs that might have had a much higher success rate per attack than any of these oversized celebrities. No offense, T-Rex. So, when I say raptor, what pops into your head? Probably a human-sized lizard with no feathers, opening doors and doing parkour in a kitchen. In reality, that's not quite it. Raptor in the dinosaur world usually means dromaeosaurs, Velociraptor, Deinonychus, Utahraptor, and their extended murderbird family. These were mostly mid-sized predators, and a lot of them were way smaller and fluffier than the movies sold you. Real Velociraptor was closer to a big turkey with knives than a Jurassic Park motorcycle buddy. Feathers, long stiff tails, bird-like hips, and brains that were pretty decent for their time. And then there's the famous weapon, that enlarged sickle claw on the second toe. The meme is that they used it to leap onto a 10-ton herbivore and unzip its guts like a sleeping bag. Cool visual. Here are the facts. When you look at the curvature and the way the joints actually move, that claw seems much better as a hooking, gripping, and pinning tool than as a giant can opener. Biomechanical studies suggest it was great for latching onto prey, maybe climbing onto larger animals, or even digging into softer parts, but those big slashing disembowelment moves? Probably not a daily occurrence. So what exactly gives with the knife-wielding wolf pack image? Part of it comes from Deinonychus fossils found alongside big plant eaters and trackways that show multiple dromaeosaurs moving together. That looks suspiciously like group behavior, but were they true, coordinated pack hunters like wolves? Or more like a bunch of hungry crocodiles all showing up at the same buffet? That's where the debate lives. Some bone beds hint at repeated group use of the same area, yet they don't come with a sign that says, "Hi, we hunted cooperatively." And to me, that's very strange, because we really want them to be tiny tactical geniuses. Either way, their lethality style was very different from the giant bruisers. Raptors were built for agility and precision, long legs, good balance, flexible tails, grabbing hands, and that clingy toe claw all point to fast, controlled attacks. They probably excelled at taking down smaller or mid-sized prey, or harassing bigger animals by darting in, hanging on, and letting blood loss and panic do the work. Less one bite and you're done, more you are now being swarmed by feathery knives, no offense. So on a one-on-one card, a single velociraptor is not beating a T-Rex. That's just not happening. But if you're asking which dinosaurs had a high day-to-day success rate, a group of mid-sized dromaeosaurs might quietly top the charts. Smaller bodies, lower energy needs, flexible diets, and a possible tendency to team up. That's an evolutionarily efficient killer, even if it's less cinematic. With that out of the way, we've talked about giant solo monsters and surgical strike teams. But what if some dinosaurs weren't just killing herbivores? They were built to hunt other giant predators? Up next, we get into the real nightmare fuel, the dinosaur arms race, where the target was another apex hunter. If hunting a 10-ton plant eater is like taking on a tank, hunting another apex predator is like taking on a tank that bites back. So what kind of dinosaur signs up for that job description on purpose? In reality, we have pretty solid hints that some theropods didn't just compete with other carnivores, they ate them. This is called intraguild predation, which is a fancy way of saying, I'm not just your rival, I'm your problem. We found bite marks on tyrannosaur bones that match other tyrannosaurs, abyssosaurid bones chewed on by other big meat eaters, and mixed bone beds where multiple predator species died and apparently snacked on each other. Here are the facts. In modern ecosystems, this is normal. Lions kill hyenas, hyenas kill lion cubs, wolves kill coyotes, crocodiles grab big cats at waterholes. A lot of the time, it's not even about food, it's about deleting the competition. So when we see tyrannosaur teeth gouged into the jaws and ribs of other tyrannosaurs, or healed bite marks that show they survived an attack from their own kind, it starts to look less like a one-off freak event and more like a lifestyle. Now scale that up to whole communities. In late Cretaceous North America, you don't just have Tyrannosaurus, you have smaller tyrannosaurids, like juvenile T-Rex, and earlier species that lived alongside other carnivores and probably targeted whatever they could overpower. In South America and India, abelisaurids shared space with other big hunters and giant herbivores. Niche partitioning kicks in. Some predators go for giant sauropods, some for mid-sized herbivores, and some may specialize in risky, high-reward targets like juveniles of the biggest species or even rival carnivores that wander too close. And to me, that's very strange from a who's deadliest angle, because hunting other predators is a brutal exam. Your prey has teeth, claws, armor, maybe a pack of friends, and the exact same survival software you do. You need weapons, but you also need timing, strategy, and the ability to survive a counterbite that can turn your skull into wet cardboard. Any dinosaur that consistently passed that test was operating at the very top end of the deadly spectrum, even if it wasn't the absolute biggest thing around. So what exactly gives when we try to rank them? A giant that mostly bullies herbivores might look unbeatable in a movie, but a smaller theropod that occasionally assassinated other apex hunters might be deadlier in a gladiator sense, even if its overall impact on the ecosystem was lower. It's the difference between a heavyweight bruiser and a knife fighter who only shows up for boss battles. With that out of the way, pattern interrupt time, what if the scariest killers of the dinosaur age weren't even on land? Because while all these dinosaurs were busy shredding each other, some of the most horrifying ambush specialists were waiting in the water, and a lot of them weren't dinosaurs at all. So, if the oceans were full of nightmare reptiles that don't technically count as dinosaurs, where does that leave the internet's favorite water dinosaur, Spinosaurus? You know the one. Giant sail on its back, crocodile face, shows up in movies just to bully a T-Rex and yeet it into a river. In reality, Spinosaurus is kind of the poster child for how messy this whole deadliest conversation gets. On land, it's a theropod dinosaur in the same broad group as TB, Rex, and Velociraptor, but its body is screaming, "Please put me near water." Long, low skull, narrow crocodile-like snout. Conical teeth that are great for gripping slippery prey instead of slicing off steaks. This is not a steak knife. This is chopsticks for fish. Here are the facts as we understand them right now. Its nostrils are pushed back from the tip of the snout, so it could stick just the front of its jaws into the water like a heron or a crocodile without drowning itself. Its limb bones are unusually dense, which is a classic aquatic adaptation to help counteract buoyancy so you don't float like a pool noodle. And the tail? Recent fossils show this big, fin-like side-to-side paddle way better for swimming than the stiff tails you see in most land theropods. Put that together and you get a picture of a semi-aquatic ambush hunter, cruising rivers and lagoons, lunging after giant fish and anything dumb enough to drink at the shoreline. Deadly? Absolutely. Especially if you're a sawfish the size of a car. But is that the same kind of deadliest as a bone-crushing T-Rex that can dominate almost anything it meets on land? Probably not. And this is where we have to clear up a huge dino-normie mistake. Spinosaurus is a dinosaur, full stop. It's a theropod. It walks on its hind legs when it bothers to. It's part of that classic dinosaur family tree. Mosasaurs, pliosaurs, ichthyosaurs, all the classic sea monsters you see on posters, totally different groups of marine reptiles. Same time, same general planet-wide chaos, but not dinosaurs. If you put mosasaur as your answer to name a dinosaur on a quiz show, you're getting buzzed out. So what exactly gives with Spinosaurus's deadliest reputation? It was probably incredible at what it did. Hunting big aquatic prey, maybe stealing carcasses, maybe snapping at unwary dinosaurs that wandered too close to the bank. But its whole design leans into that niche. It's specialized. It's not built to sprint across open plains or wrestle giant herbivores all day. And to me, that's very strange, but also kind of perfect. Even the wateriest dinosaur we found is still hugging the coastlines and rivers, not living out in the open ocean like a mosasaur. The truly optimized, pure efficiency killers of the Mesozoic seas, those belong to a completely different evolutionary experiment. With that out of the way, we can finally meet them. The animals that make a T. Rex looked like a landlocked amateur in their environment, and that still, annoyingly, don't count as dinosaurs on any quiz show you'll ever take. So if T, Rex was the landlocked amateur who was actually running the show once you stepped off the beach and into the water. In reality, the late Cretaceous ocean was basically a mosasaur theme park if the rides could eat you in one bite. Mosasaurs were not dainty. Picture a giant serpentine marine lizard related to modern monitor lizards and snakes, stretched out to over 15 meters in the biggest species. Long, muscular body, paddle-like limbs, and a tail built like a biological torpedo fin. Their skulls had double-hinged jaws and rows of backward-pointing teeth. So once something went in, it was not coming back out. Many of them could just inhale large prey whole. You're a turtle, a fish, even another marine reptile? Congratulations, you're basically a noodle. And they didn't just look scary, they owned those seas. By the late Cretaceous, mosasaurs were the apex predators across huge chunks of the world's oceans, filling the role the big theropod dinosaurs had on land. Only, instead of a flat, two-dimensional hunting ground, they worked in full 3D space, above, below, behind, out of the gloom. But they weren't the first marine nightmares. Roll the clock back a bit, and you meet the pliosaurs, the short-necked branch of the plesiosaur family tree. Think Leopleurodon, massive head, relatively compact body, 4 huge flippers like underwater wings. These things were built for burst speed, not marathon cruising. One second you're a comfortable ichthyosaur minding your own business, the next second a pliosaur skull the size of a car erupts out of the dark and turns you into confetti. Here are the facts. Both mosasaurs and plesiosaurs came with a pretty similar killing toolkit. Streamlined bodies to slice through water, either power-stroke tails or overbuilt flippers for acceleration, and jaws that opened ridiculously wide. Some had slicing, steak knife teeth. Others had big, conical, bone-crushing teeth for grabbing and not letting go. Add in sensory adaptations like big eyes for low light and pressure-sensitive snouts to detect movement, and you've basically got the marine analogues of apex theropod dinosaurs, but operating in a medium where the attack can come from literally any direction. So, what exactly gives? If they look like sea dinos, why aren't they dinosaurs? Taxonomy time, dino normies. Dinosaurs are one specific branch of the reptile family tree. Mosasaurs are closer to lizards and snakes. Pliosaurs and other plesiosaurs are their own weird group. They just independently evolved extreme aquatic adaptations and all the murder traits that came with that. And to me, that's very strange because pop culture keeps lumping them in as water dinosaurs anyway. With that out of the way, does the label even matter? If you're ranking deadliest killers of the dinosaur age, a 1-5, meet a mosasaur that can swallow you whole probably deserves a spot near the top, even if some paleontologist pops up to say, I'm actually not a dinosaur. So when we try to crown a true champion, do we care about family tree technicalities or raw lethality? And just when you think it's a simple land versus sea showdown, there's one more marine predator group waiting in the wings that complicates everything. To really settle this, we're going to have to drag all of these killers onto the same conceptual playing field and see who walks, swims, or slithers away. So with all these monsters on the board, we need to stop thinking like dino normies, arguing about who wins in a fight, and start asking, wins at what exactly? In reality, deadliest isn't one thing. It's a bundle of stats. You've got maximum damage per hit, bite force, tooth shape, how much you can wreck in one chomp. Then there's hunting success rate, how often an attack actually turns into a meal. Add prey size range. Are you bullying everything from juveniles to giants, or just rabbit-sized snacks? And finally, ecological dominance. How much of the local food web is basically routed through you? Here are the facts. On land, T-Rex and the big carcharodontosaurids are like two different final bosses spec'd into opposite builds. T-Rex is the bone crusher. Estimates put its bite over 30,000 newtons, probably the strongest of any land animal in Earth's history. Its teeth are thick, banana-shaped stakes designed to punch through bone and keep going. One bite, and you're not just bleeding, your skeleton is now optional. Carcharodontosaurus? Think Giganotosaurus. Carcharodontosaurus went the other way. Lower bite force, but long, blade-like teeth with serrations that turned flesh into confetti. Their skulls were built more for fast, slashing head movements than for slow industrial crushing. So in a single hit, T-Rex might do more structural damage, but a Carcharodontosaurid could carve open huge areas of soft tissue with terrifying speed. Two peaks of lethality, same group of dinosaurs, totally different traits. But if we're talking success rate, the real grinders might be the raptors and mid-sized theropods. A velociraptor, or Deinonychus, isn't soloing a sauropod, no offense, but it can probably hunt way more often on smaller prey with a much higher chance of actually catching something. Their sickle claws, good balance, and decent brains all point to precision attacks, maybe even group coordination in some species. Evolution doesn't care if you never take down the biggest thing in the ecosystem. It cares if you eat consistently and don't die doing it. Now toss in the marine reptiles, and it gets worse. Mosasaurs and pliosaurs were like the Mesozoic's answer to what if the water itself hated you? Streamlined bodies for rapid acceleration, tails built to explode forward, and jaws that could engulf you plus your emotional baggage. In ambush mode, their success rate was probably absurd. If you wandered into the strike zone, the fight might already be over. And then there's strategy and intelligence as force multipliers. T. Rex had an insane sense of smell. Some marine reptiles may have had sensitivity to pressure waves in water that's basically the aquatic version of wall hacks. Pack coordination, ambush versus long-distance pursuit, night hunting, all of that can turn a decent weapon set into an almost unfair one. So what exactly gives? If we're trying to crown a single deadliest dinosaur, we might be asking the wrong question. Evolution isn't optimizing for cinematic one-on-one boss fights. It's optimizing for calories in, risk out, over huge stretches of time. And to me, that's very strange, because it means the true champion might not be the biggest or the strongest, but the one killer you'd never put on a movie poster. With that out of the way, let's test this idea on a few specific contenders and see how our kill metrics actually reshuffle the leaderboard. And once you start thinking in terms of boring efficiency instead of boss fights, you run into a tiny problem. Your favorite movie dinosaurs suddenly look kind of fake. Because if your mental image of deadliest is raptors opening kitchen doors, surgically disemboweling people, a T, Rex sprinting after jeeps at highway speeds, Spinosaurus casually snapping a T-Rex's neck in one hit, and some giant sea reptile yeeting out of a stadium pool to swallow a shark like popcorn, yeah, we need to talk. Let's start with speed, because Hollywood really loves a good chase scene. In the movies, Big theropods are basically scaly race cars. In reality, here are the facts. When you put several tons of meat on two legs, there are limits unless you want shattered ankles. Most biomechanical models put even the more athletic giant predators under about 30 kilometers per hour and probably less in rough terrain. Fast enough that you and I lose that race, but not exactly Formula One. Then there's the look. Cinema loves smooth, scaly murder lizards. But a lot of these predators, especially the smaller ones, probably had at least some feather coverage. Not fluffy bathrobe chickens, but quills, fuzz, display crests. The real velociraptor, closer to a murder turkey than the door-opening superwolf we got on screen. It was about the size of a large bird, with a long snout and that famous sickle claw, but his brain and body were not built for 4D chess against humans. And to me, that's very strange, because the Dino Normie version is now more familiar than the actual animal. Speaking of hurt feelings, let's address the Spinosaurus vs. T-Rex cage match. On film, Spino just walks up, snaps a T, wrecks his neck, and drops the mic. In reality, Spinosaurus was huge and genuinely scary, but its whole body plan screams fish specialist, long narrow jaws for gripping slippery prey, dense bones, and a tail that worked kind of like a paddle. In the water or along riverbanks, nightmare. In a wrestling match with a bone-crushing land tank like T-Rex, that one-punch victory is optimistic. And what about that giant marine reptile leaping out of the water to eat sharks and, occasionally, people? Fun, yes. Accurate, no. Those mosasaur and plesiosaur cousins were brutal, but they weren't trained dolphin show performers. The other big lie is that dinosaurs would spend all their free time hunting humans. Most of these species evolved to target very specific prey: hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, fish, maybe each other. A lone, weirdly proportioned primate in synthetic fabrics would be more "what is that" than dinner. You still absolutely don't want to test that, but we're not on the menu by default. So, what exactly gives? Real deadliness is quieter. It's slow ambushes from the tree line, opportunistic scavenging, and those semi-aquatic, boring-looking fish eaters that almost never missed a strike. Less boss battle, more inevitable statistic. And with that out of the way, we can finally do the dangerous thing. In the next section, I'm actually going to crown a deadliest dinosaur under a few different definitions, and you might find the scientifically honest answer just a little bit unsatisfying. Alright, crowns on the table. If we're going to do the dangerous ranking thing, we at least have to be honest about what deadliest even means. Deadliest to bite you once? Deadliest over a lifetime of hunting? Deadliest if you're a hadrosaur just trying to vibe near a river? Those are very different nightmares. So, what exactly gives? Let's break it into a few awards. First up, deadliest bite. In reality, this one is the least controversial. Tyrannosaurus Rex basically walks away with the trophy, tiny arms and all. Biomechanical estimates put its bite force north of 30,000 newtons, maybe more, with teeth shaped like serrated bananas designed to crush bone, not just slice meat. If you lined up all the land animals in Earth's history for a single head-on chomp contest, a big tyrannosaur is the one you really, really don't want, closing its jaws first. But most efficient hunter? That's a different game. If you care about calories converted into future dinosaurs, the mid-sized theropods start looking suspiciously good. Think things in the neighborhood of Deinonychus, Utahraptor, or other dromaeosaurs picking on prey their own size or a bit bigger. Maybe small tyrannosaur relatives too. They likely had high success rates, decent brains, and tools for gripping and pinning rather than just dramatic disemboweling. Less movie poster, more, sorry, you're statistically doomed. And to me, that's very strange because the animals doing the most killing might not have looked like boss monsters at all. Next category, scariest to encounter as a human. Different question again. A full-grown T-Rex bearing down on you across an open plain. Terrifying. A giant Carcharodontosaurid like Giganotosaurus or Carcharodontosaurus materializing between the trees in a forest. Also terrifying, but in a "you see teeth and then credits roll" kind of way. And then there's Spinosaurus, lurking semi-aquatic at the water's edge. If you're filling a canteen at a Cretaceous riverbank and that sail pops up, you're having a very short hike. Context matters. Shoreline, forest, or open ground totally changes which species is deadliest to you. For most dominant in its ecosystem, we're back to the true apex crew. Giant theropods like T-Rex in North America or those big carcharodontosaurids in Gondwana sat on top of complex food webs for millions of years, shaping almost everything around them. But the herbivores weren't just walking lunches. Ankylosaurs with literal tank armor and tail clubs, and ceratopsians with horns and frills forced predators into evolutionary arms races. Those defenses are part of what made the hunters so lethal in the first place. And with that out of the way, quick reality check. If we drop the dinosaur rule, the crown for deadliest killers of the dinosaur age probably goes to marine reptiles like mosasaurs or plesiosaurs, huge jaws, fully aquatic lifestyles, entire oceans as hunting grounds, but they're not dinosaurs. No offense, so for this video, they're staying in the guest seats. Here are the facts. Even with all these categories, we're still missing one angle. What if the real deadliest dinosaurs were the ones most dangerous to the stability of their own ecosystems? And maybe, in the long run, to themselves. That's where we're headed next. So here's the uncomfortable twist. Being the scariest thing in your ecosystem is not the same as being the best at surviving. In reality, those two goals can actually fight each other. Here are the facts. Evolution loves trade-offs. If a predator species gets insanely good at one style of killing, it usually pays for that with weaknesses somewhere else. You tune the whole body plan to dominate one niche, and suddenly you're kind of terrible at everything outside that niche. Great, until the niche disappears. You can see this right now without even leaving the couch. Think about big cats. A tiger is basically a stripy murder machine for deer and wild pigs. Super stealthy, super strong, absolutely terrifying if you're made of meat, which, fun fact, you are. But tigers need dense forests, big territories, and specific prey. Compare that to coyotes or wolves, which are more generalist. They'll eat rabbits, garbage, fruit, livestock, whatever. When habitats change, the hyper-specialist cat is the one in trouble, while the flexible, kind of lower-tier predator just shrugs and moves to the suburbs. Same thing in the water. Orcas are like the marine equivalent of a boss fight. Coordinated hunters with specialized cultures that target salmon, seals, even sharks. But when a particular fish stock crashes, some orca groups are stuck. Meanwhile, more generalist marine hunters, like some dolphins or sharks, can switch menus. So what exactly gives? Being the apex killer in one very specific game doesn't mean you're good at changing games. Now scale that up to dinosaurs, giant apex theropods like Tyrannosaurus, Giganotosaurus, or Carcharodontosaurus were specialists on giant herbivores, huge skulls, bone-crushing or flesh-slicing teeth, massive bodies, and, most likely, pretty slow reproduction. You don't crank out a dozen T. Rex babies every week. They needed enormous territories and a steady supply of big plant eaters. If climate shifts, sea levels change, or plant communities crash, those big herbivores thin out, and your apex death lizard suddenly has nothing to do but starve. And to me, that's very strange when you remember they felt invincible in their own time. But the end Cretaceous impact didn't care about their traits. It smashed the entire food web, from marine plankton all the way up to the last tyrannosaur. The winners weren't the deadliest. They were the smallest, fastest breeding, most generalist, early mammals, little non-avian theropods on their way to becoming birds, anything that could eat seeds, bugs, carrion, and not be too picky. With that out of the way, we kind of have to reframe the original question. Instead of who was the deadliest dinosaur, a better question is, how did different dinosaur groups balance killing power with survivability over long stretches of time? Because the line that really wins is the one that leaves descendants. And on that scoreboard, birds walk away with the trophy. No offense. Pass and interrupt. The only living dinosaurs most of us see today are pigeons, stealing fries, and little seed eaters at bird feeders. Yet some of them, like cassowaries, are basically velociraptors in a feather suit and are still absolutely capable of ruining your day. So yeah, the deadliest dinosaurs lost, but the moderately dangerous bug-picking ones inherited the Earth. So after all that, who actually wins the deadliest dinosaur crown? We've gone from T, Rex and the giant slashers, through raptors with their sickle claws and maybe too smart for comfort brains, watch predator-on-predator violence, with things like Maposaurus ganging up on other giants, then jump straight off the beach into the water with mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. And in reality, by the time we tried to define deadliest at all, everything got messy. Here are the facts. There is no single, universal, mathematically provable deadliest dinosaur. There are category champions. T-Rex is your bite force monster, probably the strongest land bite in Earth's history. Some mid-sized theropods, the raptor-style hunters, were likely champions for efficiency, picking off prey with terrifying consistency. Spinosaurus seems to have been the specialist in aquatic ambush within actual dinosaurs, with those semi-aquatic traits letting it patrol the water's edge like a very angry fishing pier. But once you zoom out to the whole dinosaur age, the plot twist is that the deadliest killers might not have been dinosaurs at all. In the marine world, mosasaurs and plesiosaurs were basically living torpedoes with teeth. If you drop a T-Rex, a raptor pack, and a giant sea reptile into the same arena, the water probably walks out. So what exactly gives? It means that if you allow non-dinosaur marine reptiles into the conversation, the deadliest of the Mesozoic crown probably leaves the dinosaur group entirely, which, and to me, that's very strange for a video allegedly about dinosaurs. If we stick to true dinosaurs, the answer depends on what you care about. Raw power, you're probably picking T-Rex or another big theropod. Success rate and versatility, some of those mid-sized predators quietly rack up the wins. Pure nightmare fuel, as in, which one would you least want to turn a corner and see? Spinosaurus stalking you out of the water, or a coordinated raptor pack, are hard to beat. And this is where the dino normies and the people who now know way too much about bite mechanics, sickle claws, and bone density split. Normies just say T-Rex, obviously. You, having sat through all this, are now cursed with nuance. With that out of the way, the comment section is now legally required to contain at least 3 different ranked lists. One extremely detailed T-Rex defense essay, and probably a paragraph starting with, well, actually, so I want to hear it. Which dinosaur would you least want to be locked in a room with? And which marine reptile would you least want to share open water with? And why? Should we even let the sea monsters into a deadliest dinosaur debate, or is that cheating? If you enjoyed this kind of scientifically grounded dinosaur chaos, we can go deeper. We could talk about why water dinosaurs never really happened, how close raptors actually came to bird-level brains, or which herbivores were secretly the most overpowered tanks of their time. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you want to see next, because we are absolutely not done arguing about dinosaurs yet.